The cuffs snapped shut with a metallic clank, slicing through the patter of freezing rain outside the Westfield County Courthouse. Eleanor Jenkins, 72, stood rigid in the parking lot, her thin frame dwarfed by two bailiffs in slick black raincoats. Her faded blue dress clung to her legs, soaked through, as camera flashes popped from a cluster of reporters huddled under dripping umbrellas. A siren wailed in the distance, its pitch rising then fading into the gray morning. Her silver hair, pinned neatly despite the downpour, gleamed under the sodium glow of a street lamp. Her hands, swollen with arthritis, clutched a plastic shopping bag, its contents crinkling as she shifted her weight. The bailiffs steered her toward the courthouse steps, their boots splashing in shallow puddles. Eleanor's worn loafers slipped on the wet stone, but she caught herself, chin lifting slightly. The crowd parted, phones raised, capturing her slow ascent. A reporter in a red parka shouted, "Ms. Jenkins, why'd you break into Parkview Towers?" She didn't turn, her lips pressed into a thin line and her eyes fixed on the heavy oak doors ahead. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting stark shadows across the chipped marble floor. The air smelled of damp wool and stale coffee. Eleanor's shoes squeaked as the bailiffs guided her through a throng of onlookers, lawyers in pressed suits, clerks clutching files, a janitor pushing a mop. The courtroom door loomed, its brass handle dulled by years of use. A bailiff opened it, and the hinges groaned, releasing a wave of murmurs from within. Courtroom 5 was a sea of worn wooden benches, packed with spectators. The faded carpet muffled footsteps, but the creak of seats and rustle of papers filled the space. Judge Raymond Hargrove, 58, sat elevated behind the bench, his black robe stark against the oak paneling. His glasses glinted as he scanned a file, lips pursed. The bailiff announced, "Case number 47293, City of Westfield versus Eleanor Jenkins, criminal trespassing." Heads turned. A woman in the front row, clutching a notepad, scribbled furiously. Eleanor stood at the defendant's table, alone. Her cardigan, once her husband's, hung loose on her shoulders. She set the plastic bag on the table, its crinkle loud in the sudden hush. Hargrove leaned forward, his chair creaking. "Ms. Jenkins, do you have counsel?" His voice was clipped, each word a pebble dropped into still water. Eleanor's hands trembled as she gripped the table's edge. "No, Your Honor. I cannot afford one." Her voice was soft but steady, carrying to the back of the room. Hargrove sighed, flipping a page in the file. "This court appoints public defenders for such cases. Do you wish to request one, or shall we proceed?" Eleanor's knees shifted, her loafers scuffing the carpet. "I would like to resolve this today, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The judge's pen tapped the bench, once, twice. "Very well. How do you plead to the charge of criminal trespassing?" Eleanor straightened, her arthritic fingers flexing. "Guilty, in the technical sense, Your Honor. I was in the building without permission, but I worked there for 15 years and it was below freezing that night." Hargrove's hand shot up, silencing her. "Ms. Jenkins, this court deals in facts, not stories." His tone sharpened and the room stilled. "You admit to trespassing." "The standard fine is $250, plus court costs. Can you pay?" Her shoulders sagged, the plastic bag slipping slightly under her hand. "No, Your Honor." "I am between homes, looking for work. I care for my great-grandson 3 days a week while my granddaughter—" A low chuckle from Hargrove cut her off, echoing off the walls. "Ms. Jenkins, everyone has a story. Homelessness, babysitting duties, the law does not bend for personal circumstances." The crowd shifted, a few gasps breaking the silence. A man in a gray suit whispered to his neighbor, shaking his head. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she spoke again, her voice firmer. "I am not asking for special treatment, Your Honor. I only wish to explain why I was there." Hargrove leaned back, his chair groaning. Explain then. You are coherent, well-groomed. You have family. Why break into private property instead of finding a better solution? The word break landed like a gavel. Eleanor's fingers curled around the bag's handles. I did not break in, Your Honor. The door was unlocked for a delivery. I sat in the lobby until morning, then left for my part-time job. Hargrove's smirk flickered. A job that does not pay enough for housing, apparently. The crowd's murmur grew louder, a restless hum. A woman in a blue scarf clutched her purse, eyes narrowing at the judge. Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but the courtroom doors slammed open with a thunderous thud. Every head turned. A woman in her early 60s strode in, her charcoal suit tailored to perfection, a leather briefcase swinging at her side. Her silver-streaked hair was swept into a chignon, and a single strand of pearls caught the light. The room froze. Hargrove's smirk vanished, his glasses slipping down his nose. Ms. Winters, he said, voice tight. This is unexpected. Catherine Winters, CEO of Winters Development Group, stopped at the bar, her heels clicking on the marble. I am not here for your scheduled cases, Judge Hargrove. Her voice was smooth, edged with steel. I am here for Eleanor Jenkins. Eleanor turned, her weathered face creasing with confusion. Winters met her gaze, offering a brief, warm nod before facing the judge again. Your Honor, I request permission to address the court. Hargrove's fingers twitched on the file, but he nodded. Granted. Winters stepped forward, her briefcase snapping open with a sharp click. She withdrew a single sheet, holding it aloft. This is a record of Eleanor Jenkins's 15 years as head of housekeeping at Parkview Towers, a property my company owned until last year. The crowd leaned forward, whispers erupting. A camera flash popped from the back, illuminating Eleanor's wide eyes. Winters' voice rose, unwavering. Mrs. Jenkins is not a vagrant, as your court has implied. She is a woman whose life was upended by medical debt and foreclosure, yet she stands here with dignity you have dismissed. Hargrove's face reddened, his gavel trembling in his hand. Eleanor's plastic bag slid to the floor, spilling a cascade of yellowed documents across the carpet. The crowd gasped, and another flash lit the room, freezing the moment in stark white light. The yellowed documents skittered across the courtroom floor, their edges curling in the draft from an overhead vent. Eleanor Jenkins dropped to her knees, her arthritic hands scrambling to gather the papers. Dog-eared leases, medical bills, a faded photo of a man in a Vietnam veteran's cap. The crowd's murmurs swelled, a low roar filling courtroom 5. Catherine Winters knelt beside her, her charcoal suit stark against the faded carpet, and scooped up a stack of letters, her pearls swinging forward. A bailiff stepped toward them, but Winters's sharp glance stopped him mid-stride. Judge Raymond Hargrove slammed his gavel, the crack splitting the air. Order! His voice strained, glasses fogging under the fluorescent glare. The room quieted, but eyes remained fixed on Eleanor, her silver hair slipping from its pins as she clutched the retrieved papers to her chest. Winters rose, offering a hand. Eleanor took it, her loafers scraping as she stood, the plastic shopping bag now crumpled at her feet. Winters faced the bench, her posture unyielding. Your Honor, these documents are not mere papers. They are proof of a life, a home lost to medical debt, a veteran husband buried, a family fractured. She held up a hospital bill, its ink smudged but legible. This is why Eleanor Jenkins sought shelter in a lobby she once cleaned. The crowd shifted, a woman in a blue scarf dabbing her eyes. A reporter's pen scratched furiously, the sound sharp in the hush. Hargrove's fingers tightened on the gavel, knuckles whitening. Ms. Winters, this court is not a stage for theatrics. The defendant has pleaded guilty. The facts are clear. His tone wavered, betraying a flicker of unease. Winters stepped closer to the bench, her heels clicking. Facts, Your Honor. Then consider this. Eleanor Jenkins saved my husband's life 7 years ago, when he collapsed in Parkview Towers. She found him, called for help, stayed until the ambulance arrived. A gasp rippled through the room. Eleanor's hands froze on the documents, her weathered face tilting toward Winters. The judge's chair creaked as he leaned back, adjusting his glasses. That is irrelevant to the charge. His voice hardened, but his eyes darted to the crowd, where phones were raised, recording. Winters' lips curved slightly. Not a smile, but a challenge. Irrelevant or inconvenient, Mrs.? Jenkins worked 15 years in a building your court now criminalizes her for entering. She is not a threat. She is a victim of a system that discards its elders. The courtroom doors groaned open again, softer this time. A man in a state judicial review board uniform slipped in, his badge glinting under the lights. He stood at the back, arms crossed, watching. Hargrove's gaze flicked to him, then away, his jaw tightening. Eleanor set the documents on the table, her movements slow, deliberate. She smoothed the photo of the veteran, her thumb lingering on its edge. A prosecutor, a young woman in a gray blazer, stood abruptly, her chair scraping. Your Honor, in light of this testimony, the city requests a brief recess to review the case. Her voice was steady, but her hands fumbled with her phone, slipping it into her pocket. Hargrove's gavel hovered, then lowered. Denied. We proceed. The crowd stirred, a low hum of discontent. The woman with the notepad whispered to her neighbor, her pen tapping rapidly. Winters opened her briefcase again, withdrawing a thick folder. Then let us discuss patterns, Your Honor. My team has compiled data on your court's treatment of elderly defendants. She placed the folder on the bench, its thud echoing. 200 cases in the past year, averaging $275 in fines, money that could have housed people like Mrs. Jenkins, but instead filled court coffers. The room erupted in whispers. A man in a gray suit stood filming with his phone, the red light blinking. Hargrove's face flushed, his gavel slamming again. Miss Winters, you are out of line. This court operates by law, not your statistics. His voice cracked, and the bailiff shifted uneasily, glancing at the judicial board member. Eleanor's hands trembled as she tucked the photo into her cardigan pocket, her eyes scanning the crowd. A teenager in the back row, hoodie pulled low, stared at her, his fingers drumming on his knee. Winters' voice cut through the chaos, calm but piercing. Law, Your Honor. Then explain why elderly defendants receive harsher fines than younger ones for identical offenses. Explain why public defenders' clients face penalties 40% higher than those with private counsel. She gestured to Eleanor. Mrs. Jenkins stands here because she could not afford a lawyer, because she trusted this court to hear her. You have failed her. The judicial board member stepped forward, his boots thudding on the marble. Judge Hargrove, I suggest we take that recess now. His tone was firm, leaving no room for refusal. Hargrove's gavel dropped to the bench, his shoulders slumping. Court is in recess for 30 minutes. The crowd exhaled, a collective release of tension. Reporters surged toward the exits, phones pressed to ears, while spectators whispered in clusters. Eleanor remained at the table, her fingers tracing the table's worn edge. Winters leaned in, her voice low. Mrs. Jenkins, would you join us in chambers? Your voice matters in this. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded, gathering her documents. As they moved toward the judge's chambers, the teenager in the hoodie stood, pushing through the crowd. He stopped at the bar, his voice barely audible. Grandma, it's me. Tyler's okay. I'm here. Eleanor froze, her eyes widening. The boy's hoodie slipped back, revealing a young face, no older than 17, with a faint scar above his brow. The crowd parted as he approached, his sneakers squeaking. Winters stepped aside, her briefcase clicking shut. Eleanor's hand reached out, trembling, and touched his arm. The room seemed to hold its breath, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Outside, the rain intensified, hammering the courthouse roof, as a camera flash lit the scene, capturing the boy's outstretched hand and Eleanor's tear-streaked face. The chamber door slammed shut, its thud swallowed by the drumming rain outside the Westfield County Courthouse. Eleanor Jenkins stood in the cramped room, her soaked blue dress dripping onto the polished oak floor. Her silver hair, now loose, clung to her weathered cheeks. She clutched her plastic shopping bag, its crinkle faint against the tick of a wall clock. Catherine Winters set her leather briefcase on a mahogany table, her pearls catching the dim glow of a brass lamp. Judge Raymond Hargrove slumped into a leather chair, his robe pooling around him, glasses fogged with sweat. The judicial board member, his uniform badge glinting, leaned against a bookshelf lined with legal tomes. His boots scuffed the floor as he crossed his arms. The prosecutor, her gray blazer creased, stood by a narrow window, rain streaking the glass behind her. Eleanor's grandson, the teenager in the hoodie, hovered near the door, his scar faintly visible in the lamplight. His sneakers squeaked as he shifted, eyes darting between Eleanor and the others. Winters opened her briefcase, the snap echoing. She slid a stack of papers across the table, their edges curling. "Judge Hargrove, these are court records from the past year. Elderly defendants, fined, jailed, dismissed, without context." Her voice was steady, each word deliberate. Hargrove's fingers twitched, but he didn't touch the papers. His chair creaked as he leaned forward, jaw tight. "Ms. Winters, this is not a public forum. You cannot barge in and dictate procedure." His tone was sharp, but his eyes flicked to the board member. Eleanor set her bag on the floor, its contents spilling. A faded lease, a hospital bill, the photo of her veteran husband. She knelt, gathering them, her arthritic hands trembling. The teenager dropped to his knees beside her, scooping up a letter. "Grandma, let me." His voice was low, urgent. Eleanor's hand paused on the photo, her thumb brushing the man's face. She nodded and he stuffed the papers back into the bag, his hoodie sleeve riding up to reveal a tattooed wrist. Winters stepped closer to the table, her heels clicking. "Procedure, Your Honor? Your procedure fined Eleanor Jenkins for seeking shelter in a building she cleaned for 15 years. She pointed to the photo in Eleanor's hand. Her husband, Robert Jenkins, a Purple Heart recipient, lost their home to medical debt. That is the context you ignored." The prosecutor turned from the window, her phone slipping from her hand to clatter on the sill. She didn't pick it up, her eyes on Eleanor. Hargrove's face reddened, his glasses slipping. "This court processes thousands of cases. We cannot investigate every defendant's life story." His voice rose, cracking on the last word. The board member straightened, his badge catching the light. "Yet you dismissed her explanation without hearing it, Judge." His tone was calm but firm, his gaze unyielding. Hargrove's chair groaned as he shifted, his hands gripping the armrests. Eleanor stood, the photo clutched to her chest. Her loafers scuffed the floor as she moved to the table, her voice soft but clear. "Your Honor, I worked at Parkview Towers for 15 years. I mopped floors, cleaned apartments, helped residents. That night, it was -10 outside. The shelter was full. I sat in the lobby, nothing more." Her words hung in the air, the clock's tick louder in the silence. The teenager's fists clenched, his knuckles whitening. Winter's eyes narrowed, her hand resting on the table. "Mrs. Jenkins is not an anomaly. Your court processed 200 elderly defendants last year, fines averaging $275, sentences harsher than for younger offenders." "Why?" She tapped the stack of papers, her nail clicking against the wood. Hargrove's mouth opened, then closed, his gavel hand twitching. The prosecutor stepped forward, her blazer rustling. Your Honor, the city could redirect those fines to housing programs. We have precedent in other counties. Her voice was tentative, testing. The board member nodded, his boots thudding as he approached the table. That is a start, but we need systemic change, mandatory needs assessments, social service referrals before penalties. He looked at Eleanor, his expression softening. Mrs. Jenkins, your case exposes a failure. We need your perspective to fix it. Eleanor's shoulders straightened, the photo slipping into her cardigan pocket. Her grandson moved closer, his hand brushing her arm. Hargrove's chair scraped as he stood, his robe swishing. This is ambush tactics, not justice. I will not have my court turned into a spectacle. His voice boomed, but his eyes darted to the door where footsteps echoed in the hall. Winter's lips curved slightly, her voice low. A spectacle, Judge? Or accountability? The press outside, the Tribune, the Attorney General, they are watching. The prosecutor's phone buzzed on the sill, ignored as she stared at Winters. The door swung open, hinges creaking. A woman with a press badge, her coat dripping, stepped in, followed by a man in a suit, his tie loosened. Commissioner Wilson, State Judicial Review Board, he announced, his voice cutting through the tension. Judge Hargrove, we are here to discuss court practices now. Hargrove froze, his gavel hand dropping. The reporter's pen scratched, her eyes flicking to Eleanor, who stood silent, her bag at her feet. Winters gestured to Eleanor. Mrs. Jenkins should speak. Her experience is why we are here. Eleanor's grandson squeezed her arm, his tattooed wrist visible. She nodded, stepping to the table, her loafers silent now. I lost my home because my husband's cancer drained our savings. I slept in my car, in lobbies, to stay warm. I am not a criminal. I am just trying to live. Her voice trembled but held, the room still. The reporter's camera flashed, the light harsh against the rain-streaked window. Hargrove sank into his chair, his robe crumpling. The commissioner nodded, his badge glinting. Mrs. Jenkins, thank you. Judge, we will reconvene in 1 hour. Expect changes. He turned to the door, the reporter following, her heels clicking. Winters picked up her briefcase, her pearls swinging. Mrs. Jenkins, let us get you dry. This is not over. As they moved to leave, the teenager grabbed Eleanor's bag, slinging it over his shoulder. The rain outside roared, shaking the window. A crowd's murmur grew in the hall, phones flashing through the doorway. Eleanor paused, her hand on the photo in her pocket, as a siren wailed closer, its red light pulsing through the glass, bathing the room in a flickering glow. The courthouse hallway pulsed with chaos, camera flashes cutting through the haze of cigarette smoke and damp air. Eleanor Jenkins stepped from the judge's chambers, her faded blue dress still clinging to her thin frame, the hem darkened by rain. Her silver hair, now fully unpinned, framed her weathered face in loose strands. She gripped the photo of her veteran husband, its edges creased, as her grandson, in his scarred hoodie, held her plastic shopping bag slung over his shoulder. Catherine Winters led the way, her charcoal suit pristine despite the humidity, her heels clicking on the chipped marble floor. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrusting forward, their shouted questions overlapping. Mrs. Jenkins, did you expect this outcome? Ms. Winters, is this a publicity stunt? Eleanor flinched, her loafers faltering, but her grandson stepped closer, his tattooed arm shielding her. Winters raised a hand, her pearls glinting under the flickering fluorescent lights, and the crowd stilled. Mrs. Jenkins has endured enough today. She will speak when ready. Her voice was calm, commanding, slicing through the din. The rain outside hammered the courthouse windows, its rhythm syncing with the flash of red and blue lights from a police cruiser parked at the curb. The hall smelled of wet wool and ink, the air thick with tension. A woman with a press badge pushed forward, her recorder raised. "Mrs. Jenkins, what happened in that courtroom?" Eleanor's hand tightened on the photo, her arthritic fingers trembling. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her grandson's jaw clenched, his sneakers squeaking as he shifted. Winters guided them toward a side exit, her briefcase swinging. The crowd parted, phones recording, their screens glowing in the dim light. A janitor, mop paused mid-swipe, watched from a corner, his eyes narrowing at the reporters. The exit door loomed, its glass panels streaked with rain. As Winters reached for the handle, a man in a suit, tie loosened, hair slick with water, blocked their path. "State Attorney General Robert Diaz," he said, his voice low but firm. "Mrs. Jenkins, a word before you leave." Eleanor stopped, her loafers scuffing the marble. Her grandson's hand hovered near her arm, his scar catching the light. Diaz's suit jacket dripped, leaving a puddle at his feet. "Your case has raised questions about this court's practices," he said, his eyes on Eleanor. "I need your input for a statewide review of elder homelessness cases." He handed her a business card, its edges crisp. Eleanor took it, her fingers brushing the embossed text, and tucked it into her cardigan pocket beside the photo. Winters nodded, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Jenkins will consider it. For now, she needs rest." Diaz stepped aside, but his gaze lingered on Eleanor, then shifted to the reporters, who surged forward again. A camera flash popped, freezing Eleanor's silhouette against the glass door. Her grandson pushed it open, and a gust of cold rain swept in, scattering papers across the floor. The crowd gasped, scrambling to capture the moment. Outside, the downpour roared, soaking Eleanor's dress anew. A black SUV idled at the curb, its wipers slashing rhythmically. Winters gestured to it, her briefcase now under her arm. "Mrs. Jenkins, my driver will take you somewhere dry." Eleanor hesitated, her eyes scanning the crowd, reporters, onlookers, a woman in a blue scarf clutching a notepad, her face streaked with tears. The grandson touched Eleanor's shoulder. "Grandma, let's go. Tyler's waiting." His voice was soft, urgent. Eleanor nodded, stepping into the rain. Her loafers splashed in a puddle, and she clutched the photo tighter. The SUV's door opened, a driver in a black cap holding an umbrella that buckled in the wind. As Eleanor climbed in, her grandson following, a reporter shouted, "Mrs. Jenkins, will you sue the court?" The door slammed shut, muffling the question. Inside, the leather seats creaked, the air warm and heavy with the scent of polished wood. Winters slid in beside them, her pearls clicking as she settled. The driver pulled away, tires hissing on the wet asphalt. Streetlights blurred through the tinted windows, their glow fractured by rain. Eleanor's hands rested in her lap, the photo and business card now joined by a damp envelope from her bag. Her grandson unzipped his hoodie, revealing a faded t-shirt, and leaned forward. "Grandma, you okay?" She nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line, but her eyes stayed fixed on the envelope. Winters opened her briefcase, withdrawing a single sheet. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is a formal request for your consultation on my foundation's housing initiative." She handed it to Eleanor, her nail clicking against the paper. "Your experience could shape policy, not just here but across the state." Eleanor's fingers traced the letterhead, her arthritic joints stiff. She set it beside the photo, her gaze distant. The SUV slowed at a traffic light, its red glow pulsing through the rain. A billboard loomed outside, its faded image of Parkview Towers barely visible. Eleanor's breath caught, her hand tightening on the photo. Her grandson followed her gaze, his fists clenching. "That's where you worked, right?" His voice was tight, the scar above his brow stark in the dim light. Eleanor nodded, her silver hair catching the streetlight's gleam. Winters leaned forward, her voice low. "That building is why I came today, Mrs. Jenkins. You worked there, helped residents, saved my husband's life. I sold it last year, but I never forgot you. She paused, her pearls shifting as she turned. When I saw your name on the court docket, I knew I had to act. Eleanor's eyes met hers, wide, searching. The SUV lurched forward, the engine humming as the rain intensified. The driver turned onto a quieter street, the courthouse's lights fading behind them. A phone buzzed in Winter's briefcase, its vibration sharp. She ignored it, her focus on Eleanor. There is more to discuss, but not tonight. You need rest, and I need your story to reach the right ears. Eleanor's grandson shifted, his sneakers tapping the floor. What about the judge? He just gets to walk away? His tone was sharp, his tattooed wrist flexing. Winter's lips curved slightly, not a smile, but a promise. Judge Hargrove will face scrutiny. The Attorney General, the review board, they are not done. The SUV stopped at a modest diner, its neon sign flickering through the rain. The driver opened the door, the umbrella snapping open. Eleanor stepped out, her loafers sinking into a puddle. Her grandson followed, bag in hand, as Winters remained in the vehicle. The diner's door jangled as Eleanor entered, the smell of coffee and grease thick in the air. A waitress, her apron stained, looked up, then froze, recognizing Eleanor. The photo slipped from Eleanor's hand, fluttering to the floor. Her grandson bent to retrieve it, but a gust from the open door sent it skittering under a booth. The waitress rushed over, her tray clattering, and knelt, pulling out the photo and a folded newspaper, its headline screaming, "Courtroom Confrontation, Elderly Woman Exposes Judicial Bias." Eleanor's face stared back from the front page, her eyes wide, caught mid-step in the courthouse hall. The newspaper's ink smudged under the diner's fluorescent lights. Eleanor Jenkins' face frozen on the front page, her silver hair stark against the courthouse's marble backdrop. The waitress, her apron sagging, held the paper aloft, her tray forgotten on the counter. Rain battered the diner's windows, the neon sign outside hissing as it flickered. Eleanor stood rooted, her faded blue dress dripping onto the checkered floor, her arthritic hands empty without the photo of her veteran husband. Her grandson, hoodie unzipped, knelt under the booth, his tattooed wrist brushing the sticky linoleum as he retrieved the creased picture. The waitress's eyes widened, darting between Eleanor and the headline, "This is you, ain't it?" Her voice trembled, the paper rustling in her grip. Eleanor's lips parted, but no sound came. Her loafers shifted, squeaking faintly. The grandson rose, clutching the photo, his scar catching the light. "Yeah, that's her." His tone was sharp, protective, as he handed Eleanor the picture. She took it, her fingers tracing the familiar edges, tucking it into her cardigan pocket beside the Attorney General's business card. The diner's door jangled, admitting a gust of rain and the clatter of boots. A woman in a blue scarf, her notepad sodden, pushed inside, followed by a man with a press badge, his camera slung around his neck. The crowd's murmur swelled, forks pausing mid-bite, coffee cups hovering. Eleanor's grandson stepped in front of her, his sneakers planted wide. "Back off," he snapped, his fists clenching. The woman hesitated, her pen poised, but the photographer raised his camera, the lens glinting. Catherine Winters' SUV idled outside, its wipers slashing through the downpour. The driver, cap low, held the door open, but Winters remained in the doorway, her charcoal suit untouched by the rain. Her pearls gleamed as she surveyed the diner, her briefcase now closed at her side. "Mrs. Jenkins," she called, her voice cutting through the chatter. "We should leave." Her heels clicked as she stepped inside, the crowd parting. The waitress lowered the newspaper, her tray clattering as she set it down. Eleanor's hand tightened on the photo in her pocket, her eyes scanning the faces, curious, pitying, accusing. A man in a trucker hat at the counter turned, his mug steaming, and muttered, "Shouldn't be breaking into buildings." The woman in the scarf scribbled, her lips pursed. Eleanor's grandson spun toward the man, his hoodie sleeve riding up. "She was freezing, man. What's your excuse for sitting there judging?" The trucker's mug froze midair, the diner falling silent. Winters moved to Eleanor's side, her presence a shield. "Mrs. Jenkins is not a spectacle. She is a survivor." Her voice was low, but it carried, the words landing like stones. The photographer lowered his camera, the flash dormant. Winters gestured to the door, where the SUV's headlights pierced the rain. Eleanor nodded, her loafers scuffing as she moved, her grandson close behind, the plastic shopping bag swinging in his grip. The waitress stepped forward, her apron twisting in her hands. "Wait. Eleanor, I worked with you at Park View, remember? Night shift 98. Her voice cracked, eyes bright. "You brought me soup when my kid was sick." Eleanor paused, her weathered face softening. She tilted her head, recognition dawning. "Maggie," she said, the name soft, certain. The waitress nodded, thrusting the newspaper into Eleanor's hands. "Take it. People need to know your story." Eleanor's fingers closed around the paper, its headline bold against her trembling hands. The crowd watched, the air thick with coffee steam and rain's chill. Winter's hand rested lightly on Eleanor's arm. "We will ensure they do." Her pearls shifted as she turned to the photographer. "You want a story? Follow us tomorrow. Parkview Commons groundbreaking 10 a.m. The man's camera strap twitched, his nod quick. The diner's door swung open again, the bell jangling. A young woman in a diner uniform, her hair in a tight bun, rushed in, her coat soaked. "Grandma!" Her voice broke as she spotted Eleanor, pushing past the crowd. Eleanor's eyes widened, the newspaper slipping to her elbow. "Jessica," she whispered, stepping forward. The young woman, her granddaughter, threw her arms around Eleanor, her sobs muffled against the faded cardigan. The grandson joined them, his hoodie brushing Jessica's coat, the plastic bag dropping to the floor. The crowd's murmur softened, phones lowering. The woman in the scarf tucked her notepad away, her tears visible now. Winters stepped back, her briefcase clicking as she adjusted it. The photographer snapped a single shot, the flash soft, catching Eleanor's family in a tight embrace. The newspaper crumpled between them. Outside, the SUV's horn sounded, a low pulse through the rain. Jessica pulled back, her hands gripping Eleanor's shoulders. "Tyler's with a sitter. I saw the news, Grandma. I'm so sorry I couldn't—" Her voice choked off, her bun loosening in the humidity. Eleanor shook her head, her hand finding Jessica's cheek. "You're here now." Her voice was steady, the photo in her pocket a quiet weight. The grandson picked up the bag, his sneakers silent, his scar hidden in the dim light. Winters moved to the door, her heels echoing. "Mrs. Jenkins, your family is welcome to join us. We have much to discuss." She glanced at Jessica, then the grandson. "All of you." Eleanor nodded, her loafers steady now, as she followed, Jessica's arm linked with hers. The crowd parted, the trucker's mug clinking as he set it down, his head bowed. The waitress, Maggie, watched, her apron still twisted, a faint smile breaking through. The SUV's door opened, the driver's umbrella buckling in the wind. Eleanor climbed in, Jessica and the grandson following, the newspaper now folded in her lap. Winters settled beside them, her pearls clicking softly. The vehicle pulled away, tires hissing on the wet street, the diner's neon fading into the rain. Streetlights cast fractured beams through the windows, illuminating Eleanor's hands, arthritic, scarred, clutching the photo and the headline. Jessica leaned forward, her coat rustling. "Grandma, what's Parkview Commons?" Her voice was low, curious. Eleanor's eyes met Winters' a silent question. Winters' lips curved, her voice smooth. "A new beginning. Affordable housing for seniors, built where your grandmother once worked. She tapped her briefcase, where papers rustled. Mrs. Jenkins will help lead it. The grandson's sneakers tapped the floor, his hoodie unzipped fully now. You mean she's got a job? A place to live? His scar caught the passing streetlight, his tone sharp with hope. Winters nodded, her pearls shifting. If she accepts. The position includes an apartment, and we need her expertise. Eleanor's hand paused on the newspaper, her breath catching. The photo in her pocket pressed against her heart. The SUV turned onto a quiet street, the rain easing to a drizzle. A billboard loomed, its fresh paint gleaming. Parkview Commons, a home for every story. Eleanor's face appeared on it, smaller, beside a rendering of a modern building. Jessica gasped, her hand gripping Eleanor's. The vehicle slowed, stopping at a shelter's entrance, its sign weathered but lit. The driver opened the door, the umbrella steady now. Eleanor stepped out, the newspaper under her arm, her family at her side. The shelter's door creaked open, and a child's voice echoed from within. Tyler, her great-grandson, calling her name. The grandson sprinted ahead, his sneakers splashing as Jessica held Eleanor's arm. Winters remained in the SUV, her voice following them. Tomorrow, Mrs. Jenkins, 10 a.m. we changed the story. The door shut, and the vehicle pulled away, its taillights swallowed by the drizzle. Tyler burst from the shelter, his small shoes slapping the wet pavement, and threw himself into Eleanor's arms. The newspaper fell, its headlines smudging in a puddle, as camera flashes erupted from across the street, where reporters had gathered, their lenses trained on the reunion. The drizzle glistened on the shelter's cracked pavement, reflecting the flash of camera lenses across the street. Eleanor Jenkins stood under the flickering entry light, her faded blue dress damp and clinging, her silver hair catching the glow. Tyler, her 5-year-old great-grandson, clung to her legs, his sneakers muddy, his small hands gripping her cardigan. Jessica, Eleanor's granddaughter, knelt beside him, her coat unzipped, wiping his cheeks with a sleeve. The grandson, hoodie loose, held the plastic shopping bag, its crinkle drowned by the reporter's shouted questions. Mrs. Jenkins, will you speak at the groundbreaking? Is Judge Hargrove finished? Eleanor's arthritic hand rested on Tyler's head, her other clutching the photo of her veteran husband in her pocket, its edges worn smooth. Her loafers shifted, splashing a shallow puddle. She turned to the shelter's open door, where a worker in a faded polo stood, arms crossed, watching the commotion. The air smelled of wet concrete and distant exhaust, the drizzle hissing softly. Jessica rose, her bun unraveling, and took Eleanor's arm. Grandma, let's get inside. Her voice was firm, her eyes darting to the flashing cameras. The grandson stepped forward, his scar stark under the shelter's light. Y'all need to back off! His shout silenced the reporters momentarily, his tattooed wrist flexing as he raised a hand. A woman with a press badge lowered her microphone, but her phone stayed raised, recording. Eleanor's lips pressed thin, her gaze fixed on Tyler's small frame. She nodded to Jessica, and they moved toward the door, Tyler's sneakers scuffing beside her. The worker stepped aside, the shelter's interior exhaling a wave of mildew and soup broth. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting shadows on peeling paint. Bunks lined the walls, their thin mattresses sagging. Women's voices murmured from a corner, a radio crackling with static. Eleanor set Tyler on a bench, his legs swinging. She smoothed his hair, her arthritic fingers slow, deliberate. Jessica dug through the plastic bag, pulling out a crumpled sweater. Here, Grandma, you're soaked. Eleanor took it, swapping her damp cardigan, the photo and business card now tucked into the sweater's pocket. The grandson paced, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. This place ain't right for you, Grandma, not after today. His voice was low, tight, his hoodie sleeve catching on his tattoo. Eleanor's eyes met his, steady but tired. "It's warm. It's enough for tonight." Her words were soft, final. Tyler leaned into her, his small hand clutching her sleeve. Outside, the reporters' voices faded, their flashes dimming as the drizzle thickened. A shelter worker approached, her polo stained, holding a clipboard. "Eleanor, you got a visitor." She jerked a thumb toward the door. Catherine Winters stood there, her charcoal suit untouched by the rain, her pearls gleaming under the entry light. Her leather briefcase swung lightly, her heels silent on the wet pavement. The reporters stirred, cameras raised again, but Winters ignored them, stepping inside. The worker retreated, her clipboard clattering on a table. Winters stopped before Eleanor, her gaze taking in Tyler, Jessica, and the grandson. "Mrs. Jenkins, I apologize for the intrusion." Her voice was smooth, measured. "But tomorrow's groundbreaking is more than a ceremony. It's a chance to shift policy." She opened her briefcase, withdrawing a single sheet, its letterhead crisp. "This outlines a role for you. Resident coordinator for Parkview Commons. An apartment, a salary, a voice." She handed it to Eleanor, her nail clicking against the paper. Eleanor's hands trembled, the photo in her pocket a quiet weight. She took the sheet, her eyes scanning the text, job description, housing details, a start date. Jessica leaned over, her breath catching. "Grandma, this is real?" Her voice shook, her coat rustling. Eleanor's loafers scuffed the floor, her gaze lifting to Winters. "Why me?" "You don't owe me anything." Her tone was even, searching, the shelter's buzz fading around her. Winters' pearls shifted as she leaned closer. 35 years ago, Westfield General Hospital. You were a housekeeper. I was 25, alone, grieving a miscarriage. Her voice softened, the words precise. You sat with me, brought tea, held my hand. You told me about your own loss, how you carried on. I never forgot. Eleanor's eyes widened, her hand pausing on the photo. Room 302, she whispered, the memory sharp. Winters nodded, her briefcase clicking shut. The grandson stopped pacing, his sneakers silent. You knew her back then? His scar caught the light, his tone wary. Winters turned to him. I knew her kindness, and now I know her strength. She gestured to the letter in Eleanor's hand. That role is no charity. Your grandmother's experience, her survival, makes her essential. Tyler looked up, his small voice breaking through. Does that mean Grandma gets a house? His sneakers dangled, his eyes wide. Eleanor's hand rested on his head, her sweater sleeve slipping. Maybe, little one. Her voice was soft, but her fingers tightened on the letter. Jessica's hand found hers, squeezing. Grandma, you have to do this. For you, for us. Her bun loosened fully now, hair falling across her shoulders. The shelter's radio crackled, a news report cutting through. Westfield courtroom drama. Elderly defendant exposes systemic bias. Eleanor's name echoed, the room stilling. The worker reappeared, her clipboard under her arm. Eleanor, bunks are filling up. You staying? Her tone was brisk, her eyes flicking to Winters. Eleanor stood, her loafers steady, the letter now folded beside the photo. I'll stay tonight. Tomorrow I'll see. She looked at Winters, her weathered face resolute. Winters nodded, her pearls catching the light. 10 a.m., Mrs. Jenkins. My driver will come for you. The grandson slung the bag over his shoulder, his hoodie unzipped. I'm coming too. Gotta make sure they treat you right. His scar gleamed, his voice firm. Jessica lifted Tyler, his sneakers kicking lightly. We'll all be there, Grandma. The shelter's door creaked as Winters stepped out, the reporters surging forward, their flashes piercing the drizzle. She raised a hand, silencing them, and slipped into her SUV, the engine humming as it pulled away. Eleanor sat back on the bench, Tyler in her lap, the letter and photo in her pocket. The radio droned on, the news anchor's voice rising. Judge Hargrove faces review as elder homelessness crisis takes center stage. Jessica tucked the sweater around Eleanor's shoulders, her hand lingering. The grandson leaned against the bunk, his sneakers tapping, his eyes on the door where camera lights still flickered. Outside, the drizzle slowed, but a new sound rose, a crowd chanting faintly, their voices carrying through the shelter's thin walls. Justice for Jenkins! Justice for Jenkins! Placards bobbed in the distance, their ink running in the rain. Eleanor's hand tightened on Tyler's, her gaze distant, as a single camera flash lit the window, casting her shadow across the bunk, long and unbroken. The morning sun sliced through the drizzle, glinting off the steel skeleton of Parkview Commons, its half-built walls rising from the lot where Parkview Towers once stood. Eleanor Jenkins stepped from a black SUV, her faded blue dress replaced by a pressed gray skirt and blouse, her silver hair pinned neatly. Her arthritic hands held a folded letter and the photo of her veteran husband, tucked into a new leather satchel slung across her shoulder. Tyler, her great-grandson, gripped her hand, his sneakers clean, a small backpack bouncing on his shoulders. Jessica, her granddaughter, adjusted her coat, her bun tight again, while the grandson, hoodie swapped for a collared shirt, scanned the crowd, his scar faint in the daylight. The groundbreaking ceremony buzzed with motion, shovels gleaming, banners snapping in the breeze, cameras flashing from a roped-off press area. The air carried the scent of fresh concrete and cut grass, the drizzle now a faint mist. Catherine Winters stood on a low platform, her charcoal suit crisp, her pearls catching the sun. She held a microphone, her leather briefcase at her feet, as city officials and community leaders flanked her. A billboard towered behind, its bold text proclaiming, Parkview Commons, dignity in every home. Eleanor's face, smaller, stared out from the corner, her eyes resolute. Winter's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Today, we build more than a building. We build a future for seniors who have given their lives to this community. Her gaze found Eleanor, a nod passing between them. The crowd, hundreds strong, clapped, their applause rolling over the lot. Reporters leaned forward, lenses trained, while a woman in a blue scarf, notepad in hand, scribbled fiercely. Placards bobbed at the edges, their ink sharp. Justice for Jenkins. Eleanor's loafers crunched on the gravel as she guided Tyler toward the platform. Jessica's hand rested on her shoulder, her coat brushing Eleanor's satchel. The grandson followed, his collared shirt slightly untucked, his eyes narrowing at a man in a suit near the press line, Judge Raymond Hargrove, his robe gone, his glasses glinting. Hargrove stood alone, hands clasped, his face drawn as he watched the ceremony. The grandson's jaw tightened, but Eleanor's hand grazed his arm, a silent signal. He exhaled, staying close. Winters gestured to Eleanor, her pearls shifting. Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins, our resident coordinator, embodies the strength this project honors. She stepped aside, offering the microphone. The crowd hushed, camera zooming. Eleanor hesitated, her loafers pausing at the platform's edge. Tyler squeezed her hand, his small voice whispering, "You got this, Grandma." Jessica nodded, her bun catching the sun. Eleanor stepped up, the microphone heavy in her grip, her satchel steady against her side. Her voice, soft but clear, carried across the lot. 6 months ago, I slept in my car in lobbies just to stay warm. I worked 40 years, raised a family, lost my home to medical bills. She paused, her arthritic fingers flexing on the microphone. I stood in a courtroom, fined for surviving. But today I stand here, not as a defendant, but as a voice for thousands like me. The crowd erupted, cheers drowning the distant hum of traffic. Placards rose higher, their words bold. Eleanor's eyes found Hargrove, his glasses slipping as he looked away. "This building," she continued, "is a promise that no senior should face a system that punishes poverty." Her satchel shifted, the photo inside a quiet weight. Winters stepped forward, her hand light on Eleanor's arm, and took the microphone. "Mrs. Jenkins will lead Parkview Commons, ensuring every resident's story is heard." The crowd roared again, cameras flashing, the woman in the scarf dabbing her eyes. Hargrove moved, his suit creased, and approached the platform. The crowd's cheers faltered, murmurs spreading. He stopped at the base, his voice low but audible. "Mrs. Jenkins, I requested to speak today." His hands trembled, his glasses fogging. Eleanor's loafers shifted, her satchel steady. She nodded, stepping back. Winter's pearls gleamed as she watched, her expression unreadable. Hargrove took the microphone, his suit jacket flapping in the breeze. "3 months ago, I failed Mrs. Jenkins in my courtroom. I dismissed her, mocked her circumstances." His voice cracked, the crowd silent. "Since then, I have changed my court's practices, needs assessments, housing referrals, a fund for seniors from court fees." He turned to Eleanor, his glasses slipping fully now. "Mrs. Jenkins, your dignity taught me what justice should be. I am sorry." He extended a hand, the microphone shaking. Eleanor paused, her weathered face still. Her hand, arthritic but firm, met his, a brief clasp. The crowd exhaled, cameras flashing, capturing the moment. Tyler tugged her skirt, his sneakers scuffing. "Is he good now, Grandma?" Eleanor knelt, her satchel brushing the platform, and whispered, "He's trying, little one." She rose, her eyes on the crowd, where placards now mixed with raised phones, their screens glowing. Winters reclaimed the microphone, her voice sharp. "This project, led by Mrs. Jenkins, is a model for the nation. We break ground today, but the work continues." She handed Eleanor a ceremonial shovel, its blade polished. Eleanor's hands closed around it, her satchel swinging. Jessica and the grandson joined her, each taking a shovel, Tyler clutching a small trowel. The crowd pressed closer, the press line straining as dirt turned, clods falling with soft thuds. Hargrove stepped back, his suit blending into the crowd. A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Jenkins, what's next for you?" Eleanor paused, dirt on her loafers, her satchel steady. "Helping others find what I've found. A home. A purpose." Her voice carried, the sun breaking fully through the clouds, bathing the lot in light. The billboard gleamed, Eleanor's image sharp against the steel frame. The ceremony ended, but the crowd lingered, voices buzzing. Jessica lifted Tyler, his trowel waving as the grandson slung Eleanor's satchel over his shoulder. Winters approached, her briefcase now open, revealing blueprints. "Mrs. Jenkins, your apartment is ready for viewing. Will you come?" Eleanor nodded, her loafers crunching as she followed, her family at her side. They crossed the lot, the steel structure looming. A temporary trailer stood nearby, its door open, revealing a model apartment, simple, sunlit, with a small kitchen and framed photos on the walls. Eleanor stepped inside, her satchel resting on a table. Tyler ran to a window, his sneakers tapping, pointing at a courtyard garden. Jessica's hand found Eleanor's, her coat unzipped. The grandson leaned against the doorframe, his scar hidden in the soft light. Outside, the crowd's chant rose again. "Justice for Jenkins!" as cameras flashed, capturing the family through the window. Eleanor's hand rested on the photo in her satchel, her eyes on the garden, where a single flower pushed through the dirt, its petals bright against the steel. A reporter's voice cut through, broadcasting live. "Eleanor Jenkins, from courtroom to cornerstone, redefines justice." The words faded, swallowed by the hum of a new beginning as the sun climbed higher, casting no shadows,